Today we have with us Dr. Prashant Gupta. He's a very, very senior and seasoned professor in the area of supply chain management, operations management, and strategy. Sir got almost like 47 years of experience, a very, very rich experience, from a lot of public sector companies to academia. And he's been working with a lot of startups and given a lot of information and support to startups in terms of working into the area of operation management, strategic directions, and supply chain management. So, Sir's rich academic and industrial experience is with us today, and we're gonna get a lot of benefit out of his session today. He'll be sharing and talking about some of the basics of operations and supply chain management, which is very, very important for a business, for people like you who's now just thinking about starting their own business. And now with the COVID time, all of you have seen that how supply chain was an important issue. We are seeing vaccination, and everywhere we are seeing that managing operations and managing supply chain is a very, very key aspect of the business. So I thought there could be none other than Professor Gupta to talk about this. And Sir has been a mentor and professor to me as well. So I've learned a lot from him, over a period of time. And currently, Sir is a senior professor and area chair for strategy at Jaipuria Institute of Management. And today he has agreed to spare some time with us and talk about these important aspects. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us here today. And it's all over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shenu, for this very wonderful introduction. And welcome to all the participants. And I understand you all are aspiring to start something of your own. And that's what the country needs today. So we need more of job providers rather than job seekers. And somehow during my career, I've been associated with the industries who had a lot of women employment. So initial about 7 years after my engineering and MBA, I spent in Bharat Electronics Limited, BEL, Bangalore and Ghaziabad. So being an electronic industry, there are a lot of assemblies required, and even at that point of time, about 45 years back, we thought women were the best to do that job. So whether it was various electronic components or electronic assemblies, a lot of women were employed and we found them very efficient. And later on also, I spent about 20 years in watch industry. So I headed a watch unit where we were making watches for HMT. There again, in assembly, the most of the employment was women. So I always thought that as not only as employees, even as entrepreneurs, women will make great employers. And that's my feeling that women in general have a greater and holistic view of anything, and that's what is needed in business today. We need to have some holistic view rather than just very, very narrow view if we want to succeed in a long term. Now, when we talk of operations or supply chain management, the foremost and most important thing is the selection of a product or service you want to get into. So how do we select a product and or service, whichever area you want to get into, either as your own business or as part of the business? So how do you make that selection? So without going into detail, of course, we will have to do a good market research to know the customer's need. And I hope at some point of time in this program, you would have been exposed to the phenomena of design thinking also. The main thing is what is that customer wants, and why is customer prepared to buy our product or service and pay the price which we want him or her to pay. So I'll give you just some of the next slide. That's what I will start with. Some slide which have been most successful companies in context of India, then in context of the world. And so if you see this slide, this is the latest data available revenue wise, which are the top 10 companies in India. So you'll notice, if you see the names of the companies, Reliance Industries, Indian Oil, ONGC, State Bank of India, Tata Motors, BPCL, Rajesh Exports, Tata Steel, Coal India, TCS. Now, why they are at the top as far as the income levels are concerned? One very important aspect is what product or service they are into, and to what extent they are, helping the economy in Indian context as far as these companies are concerned. And you would notice that some of the companies like Reliance, IOC, ONGC, and BPCL, they are connected with the product that is petroleum product, which are the basic needs after our basic need of roti, kapda, and makan. So anybody after fulfilling some of these needs, the first thing he'll require is petrol or diesel or gas to commute from one place to another place. So they either by choice or by allocation by the government, they got into some products which are the basic need and where customers will automatically come. And some of these products like petrol and diesel, you don't need to invite customers or attract customers to come to you. But they will automatically come because it's their basic need. So that's one of the reasons that they are at the top as far as the revenues are concerned. But you see some companies like Rajesh Exports, TCS, and so these are the companies which have which are into businesses which are need of the hour. So TCS, they are into the consultancy of providing various services of various kind, and naturally we are living in a knowledge economy today, and that's why some of the consultancy organizations, whether it is TCS or other consultant organizations like Infosys and HCL, if you see, they are at the top. Rajesh Exports, so they one of the main products they are dealing and trading in is the ornaments, the gold ornaments, gold jewelry and all, and which we as Indians, have a great attraction, great preference to preserve our things in gold or jewelry. So the point I'm trying to make is, it's very important when we get into any business or we want to start something of our own. What is the type of product service? What is the need? What is the demand of that product or service? Now let us see, but they may not be making the highest profits. Let us see some of those companies which are making good profit. If you see again Indian context, these are the top 10 companies again in the year 2020 as far as the profits are concerned. TCS number one, as I mentioned, knowledge economy today, and that's why people approach such companies and they can get their price what they want. So that's why the highest profit making company as far as India is concerned. Reliance, while there's pressure on their petroleum products, but they were smart enough to change their business orientation from not just the petroleum products, but almost into various sectors which are directly connected with the customers. So whether it is Reliance Retail, whether it is Reliance Digital, whether it is Reliance Trends, whether it is now Reliance Jio. So they got into products for which customers are ready to pay that Reliance Trends, you are ready to pay any price for good garments. So again, I'm further trying to emphasize that it's very important that we select a proper product or service if you want to start something of our own, and then see what are those things for which customer is ready to pay. So again, if I read the names of the companies: TCS, Reliance, SDFC, of course, banking, you know, uh, the business itself is quite profitable if it managed properly. Infosys, again a consultancy organization. ITC, again, uh, though the main production they started with was cigarettes, but then they got into various diversification, and that's how they have been able to earn good amount of profit. SDFC Bank, ONGC, Coal India, Power Grid Corporation, and NTPC. Some of these are utility companies, and of course, because still prices of some of the utilities are still controlled by the government, so maybe that may be one of the reasons for them making good profits. But the main idea is, are you into a product or service which customer wants and for which customer is ready to pay? So while we make a selection, we have to look into what sort of business environment we are in, and how do we plan, whether it is our operations or supply chain or business in general. So let us see some of the changing patterns which are changing the products or services and the way they are provided or manufactured. Lot of change in technologies. Uh, you know, if we are able to see, because I don't know what sort of startups you plan to have get into, but presuming that many of you will get into the services, if you see the type of impact these technological changes have made in the service sector, we didn't see any BPO prior to 2000, or say around 1998 was the first BPO or call center we used to call, with the GE established in India. Now, why was it not earlier? Because there was no technology available where you could transfer data or videos or even a normal text instantaneously from one part of world to another part of world. So when the communication and IT made it possible to transfer such data and videos, text, etc., from one place to another place, so, this outsourcing of processes became possible. Earlier, otherwise, we knew outsourcing only in context of products where some part of the processes will be done by somebody else who is established nearby, or maybe some of the components for a product we'll like to get manufactured to our design from somebody else. But then it is the technology which made it possible for transfer of some of the processes from one part of the world to another part of the world. And millions of people now are being employed as far as our country is concerned in various types of services we are providing online for customers who may be in any part of the world. So that's a big impact the technology change has made on the type of businesses, the services business, which was not possible earlier. Now we have such a number of companies who are providing such services. Rapid technology diffusion. Now, diffusion in the sense how much time you take to convert an innovation into a commercially viable product or service. So there have been innovations, but then we were not able to convert that into a product which a customer would buy in a short time. Just to give one or two example, for example, the Kodak company, they had developed the digital technology as far as photography was concerned. But then they thought that it will not make a business sense to use digital technology for photography business. And their interest also was that, it may kill their original business of photographic films and photographic processing materials and all. So it took some companies in Japan like Sony and all to use that technology to make digital cameras. So what I'm trying to say is that there may be innovations. But just another example, because I was part of that business. Uh, we used to make mechanical watches earlier, and they were quite popular, quite accurate and all. That then we had this digital technology where we could have electronic modules which would be same as they would do the same function which mechanical watches used to do. That means showing time and more accurately. And liquid crystal display technology, LCD technology, came earlier. And we were making watches for HMT. We introduced our own watches also. It was a government, Rajasthan government owned unit we established in Ajmer, which I was heading. So we launched some digital watches. But then at that point of time, they were not very well received by the customers, and we had to discontinue. And later on, they came again. But when the technology of liquid LEDs came, then the customers accepted not only watches but many other products. And now, even if when we see the technology in TV displays, now it's most of the TVs today we have is the LED display TVs. So the diffusion of technology, that means conversion of basic invention into a viable product, the time taken now is very less. So that we have to be careful, because that may become a challenge also for some of, if you get into a product which gets changed very fast, so that may be a challenge also. Then of course importance, greater need of importance. The space is, as I mentioned, changing very fast. And uh, while we are trying to get into a product or service, I'll give examples of both the industries. Normally, we define industry as a product. For example, if you are manufacturing television, we say it is a television industry. If you are manufacturing cars, we say it is a car industry. If you are into restaurant service, we call it is a restaurant or restaurant industry. But if you see today, uh, sometimes it may be very difficult to define whatever product or service we are providing, which industry we belong to. First, I'll give some example of product. You know, the product which is always with us today, like a wedding ring, is mobile. Now, mobile was developed and made and manufactured uh, for basic function of uh, helping communication between two people who are not sitting close. So you could communicate from say one city to another city, and later on with the development of technology from any part of the world to any part of the world. So we called it a telecom product. But today, if you go and go to buy a mobile, the first thing a customer asks is how many cameras? One camera or two cameras? People are not satisfied even with three cameras or four cameras. Now, photography is entirely a different industry. So, but you see, now there are more cameras through mobile we are buying than actually cameras. It's only the professional photographers normally, or some people who have a great hobby of photography, they only buy these days cameras. Otherwise, majority of people are doing photography through mobiles, and then all those features which are available in many of the electronic cameras are now available in mobile. So will you call this a photographic industry, a mobile? Will you call it a communication? Then we can do all the functions. We can do all the calculations. Is it a computer? It's a computer industry. So that's what I'm trying to say, that there's greater blurring of boundaries of industry, it's very difficult sometimes to identify which product we are in. That also gives a hint that while we are selecting a product, we must be sure that ultimately any product, there are greater chances of success only when that can be traded through an equipment like we name as mobile. Let us take some examples in services also. Uh, how the industry blur is there. Uh, Many people started traveling agencies. Even the biggest travel agent in India, the IRCTC, they started just with the booking of rail tickets. So they were basically an agent for booking tickets for railways for travel purpose. Now, now if you see their range of services they are providing, they are not only providing the booking of tickets for railways. They are now providing booking for various airline services. So it's not only the booking they are providing for travel, they are providing booking for hotels, they are providing booking for taxis, and many of the catering services also they have got into. Now, how do we call which industry IRCTC is in? So there's a lot of what we call as integration which is happening between different industries through a single product or a single company which is providing a set of services. So while again we plan our product and service, we have to keep this in mind. And in broader context, if you see in a global context, uh, it is helpful also. We make some product in Jaipur. Earlier, to sell it within the whole of India also was very difficult. Now with this change in technology, we can sell our product to any part in the world. So maybe we use some platform like Amazon or any other platform where we post our product details, and maybe we have our own website where people may visit and see what products or services we are providing, and those products can be supplied to any part of the world. So this globalization, while it is producing while it is causing a challenge before us, is also helping us in expanding our business horizon. So as far as any business, whether it is a product or a service, there are four aspects which I would say are key to success. So whatever product or service or whatever startup you get into, these four aspects you must keep in mind if you want to be successful. Number one, flexibility. Now, flexibility in what context? Flexibility in various contexts. Flexibility, for example, you are into a product and there are some changes in the technology, there are some changes in the processes. Now, without disturbing your present business, without disturbing your present business, uh, how quickly you are able to make changes on your products. So that's very important. So that's on the product design side. You are supplying to some people. Suppose you are into a product and you started with a product. There are some customers. Normally they ask for 15 days time, and you have tuned your supply chain, your manufacturing into supplying in 15 days time. Now suddenly your customer gets some big order and he wants in 7 days. So whether you are flexible enough to increase your production for that week so that that additional demand can be met. Now how do you do that? So how do you create that flexibility? Similarly, sometimes there may be reduction in demand. So what any quantity he wants in a week, next week the quantity may be less. So how flexible you are into changing your production level in context of a product, and changing your service level in context of a service. And if you see, the variability in a service is much more than variability in demand of a product. Even during a day, if you again say take example of a restaurant, uh, there is some early morning there's hardly any demand. 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, people come for breakfast. So there is an increase in demand. The number of customers visiting the restaurant increases. Then there is little lull between say 10 and 12. Then people start dropping in for lunch. So again, there's the demand increases. Again, afternoon time, the demand decreases. The number of customers visiting slightly reduces. Then evening time, evening snacks time, again it increases, and dinner time normally it will be the maximum. So within a day itself, you find there's big fluctuation in number of customers seeking your restaurant services. Now, what flexibility you have to cater to this meeting this changing demand? Because in a restaurant, so how do you decide number of tables you are going to have? How do you decide on number of people you are going to have to serve? How do you plan your cooking? How much quantity you should cook, when you should cook? So whether you have flexibility in that. So if you have flexibility, naturally the chances of success will be more. Whether it is related to quantity, whether it is related to the delivery schedule, whether it is related to the product design. So it's very important. Now, in case you have to make a big investment in whatever product or service you want to get into. Now, whether you can create flexibility that there also. I don't know, maybe you are clear with the concept of break-even point. Some of you who are not clear, break-even point of that is the level of operation. So if you are manufacturing a product, so whether it is 100 or 200 or 500 or 1000, depending upon your price, depending on your cost, at what level you are able to meet your fixed costs. That means higher the fixed cost, higher will be the break-even point. So break-even point is the point at which you start making profit beyond that. If you are operating at a level higher than the break-even point. So higher the break-even point, higher the fixed cost, higher the break-even point. Now, can you reduce your break-even point? So can you attain profitability at lower level of break-even point also? Now, how do you reduce that break-even point? The only way is that you reduce on the fixed costs. Now, how do you reduce on the fixed costs? You will need, if you are manufacturing a product, you will need some plant and machinery. You will need some physical infrastructure. How do you reduce on that? So can you, we have seen many examples both in production and services. As far as production is concerned, outsourcing is one of the ways. You may outsource part of your operations. You may outsource complete operation. Maybe you become a design company and a marketing company. There are many successful examples within country also, globally also, where we may call them virtual companies, where they don't have their own assets. So how do you reduce on investing on the fixed assets? Now that's fixed assets, I'll define not only the plant and machinery, not only the physical civil structure, but also the number of permanent people you employ. So how do you reduce on that? So outsourcing is one way. Taking machines on lease is another way. Just to give an example, the airline services. The only company at the moment who's making profit in airline services is Indigo. They took, the major investment in airline services on the aeroplanes. They took on lease. Will have many advantages. So some aeroplanes they took on lease, some aeroplanes they bought and then gave to somebody else on lease. So very interesting. So they could reduce on their investment on buying the aeroplanes, and that's how they don't have to pay the interest which they otherwise would have to pay if they had taken loan for buying those aircrafts. Of course, the lease rent has to be there. But suppose the passenger traffic increases, they can take more planes on lease. It decreases, they can do away with leasing of some of the planes. And that's how they created flexibility in meeting the fluctuating demand. So similar, so I gave this example in context of an airline industry, but such type of flexibility either through outsourcing and many, especially in small service setups, where the service is provided manually. There again, you can think of various ways in creating flexibility, because there may be time duration, there may be time zones where the demand will be more. I gave example of a restaurant. There will be time zones where the demand will be less. Now, how do you face that if all the services have to be provided manually? So today of course, we will have some basic number of people who will always be needed as our permanent employees, and otherwise we'll have some employees depending upon the demand level during a day or during a week, the temporary employees. Now this is becoming a big way of employment. Just to give an idea, at the moment, and this we call as gig economy. Gig economy is where the people are not employed permanently as per the requirement of the organization, or they work on as independent people who provide different services, who may be having some expertise and provide different services as per. So I am an expert on web design. So rather than working who wants me to design web for them, I do my own business. I set up my business. I contact different people who may be interested in getting their web designs. And I do that business. So this broadly we call as gig economy, where the employment is not of permanent nature. The employment is need based, and there may be some self uh, people who do self business, like some of you who are planning. Now even if you see some industries, some service industries, you didn't see them at all maybe even a decade back. Where were these we only heard about Mumbai Dabbawala, where they would collect tiffins from homes and transfer them to the office and bring back the tiffin after the people have taken their meals. Where were companies? Did we have companies like Zomato? Did we have companies like Swiggy? Could we think that there will be people needed to deliver food from a particular restaurant to us? We never thought of getting food which will become cold and which will be say served to us after it has been cooked, maybe 1 hour after it has been cooked. But then if you see the level, the way they have been growing in spite of the COVID situation they faced last year, and maybe we are getting into that trouble again. But except for a few months, they got back to the business. Now, just to give a level of employment, these companies are having Zomato more than 50,000. Swiggy, more than a lakh of people they're employing, and most of the employment is of this nature, which I call that gig economy, temporary nature or piece rate method of paying them. So that's how flexibilities are created by in whether it's a big company, in a big production company, or a very small business employing only say some people. Innovation, we talked of. Speed has become so important. So while you plan your business, how fast you can provide that service or product you want to get into. Just to give an example again, why speed may be so important and why people may be ready to pay more if you are able to supply a product or provide service faster is the courier services. You want some parcel or some letter to be delivered to somebody next day, there'll be different charges. If it's okay, if it is delivered in 2 days or 3 days time, there'll be different charges. So the the work done is same. Transportation of a particular parcel from place A to place B. But in one situation it is being done in 1 day, another situation it is being done in 3 days. And naturally you can charge different prices. Integration we already talked of. So these four aspects you must keep in mind. Flexibility, innovation, we need to continuously innovate. We need to continuously change as per the need of the customer. While I was with BEL, I was in those 7 years I spent in the development and engineering. And even those period of 7 years long back, 30, 40 years back, we were forced to do various innovations, even in those products which were not of concern for general public. So innovation today has become so important because the way the products are being produced, even the product design, they are changing so fast. Even the way the services are being provided, they are completely changed. All these .com companies, they started around late 80s, early 90s in US, and most of the companies failed. But today, if we see Amazon, it's almost the biggest retailer, maybe value wise, the income wise, it may be very close to Walmart, which is number one. And but if you see how the business process of buying has been changed, we'll earlier go to a physical store, see our product physically, maybe touch it, smell it, whatever the type of product we are buying. If we like it, we may like to see many varieties, and for that also we'll sit like a king. There'll be some sales boy or a sales girl who will be showing all the varieties to us, and then maybe we choose one and then make the payment. So we have taken the physical possession and then we are making the payment. Now that buying process is completely changed because of the technology, the online buying. So now there's nobody to show you the product. So you visit a website. If you want to see variety, you see the variety. You see the variety on website. You make a search on your own. Nobody is going to help you. Uh, then you make the payment, and then the product is delivered. So the way the even a normal process of buying you have seen has completely changed. So there will be a lot of innovation. I gave example of this food delivery. Who thought that there will be some business like this where food will be delivered? As I mentioned, we only heard of Mumbai Dabbawala. Now, this delivery, not only in food, even an online company, Amazon or any other company. Now, there's no retail company who don't have this online selling also. Otherwise, they won't be successful. So everybody, they need to, even a product, they need to deliver. And that's why this delivery business, which was not there earlier, may become a big business. I'm not able to discuss with you face to face what businesses you are thinking of getting into. Otherwise, probably I would have talked in those contexts also. So I'm keeping it a bit general so that it applies to irrespective of the type of business you want to get into. If you see a typical operation system, whether it is production or any service, there'll be some inputs which will be converted into some useful product or service. So this is a typical system view we take in context of any organization, big or small. And why customer will pay to you for any product or service? There could be basically two main reasons. Of course, you'll have to create value for him. The customer should see value in your product or service, then only he'll be able to pay for that. Now, how do you create value? I'll come to this. But then any manufacturing system, any service system, broadly, this is what we call as a value chain. There'll be some primary activities, there'll be some secondary or support activities. Now, this value chain was developed by Porter about 40 years back, and this was developed in context of manufacturing. But I'll just explain how it applies in any situation, because it was developed in context of manufacturing. So he suggested that inbound logistics operations, outbound logistics, marketing, and service and sales, they are the basic primary activities of any product. And some of the support activities which would be needed to make this successful would be firm infrastructure. What sort of infrastructure you have, how well you manage your human resources, whether you are updating your technology, so how you are managing your technology, and how efficient and effective your procurement or purchase system is. And then all this put together, whatever costs you incur to convert that input into a usable product which customer is ready to buy, and charge a price higher than your total cost, you'll be able to create margin. So that's what broadly, that's how we define a value chain. Now, these primary activities may be different in different types of business. For example, if you take a company like a logistics company, now their primary job is to transport goods from one place to another place. So they will have to collect those goods from customers, or the customers will deliver their goods to their office. They'll be transporting, and then they will be delivering to the customers. Any courier service also, any logistics service. So their primary activity is the transportation, not the manufacturing. So that's a broader term Porter used as operation. So whether you are doing a service, whether you are manufacturing a production, so what is your basic operation? So that will be your primary activity. The main idea he created in this value chain, the main purpose was two purpose. One is that what is the total cost of doing all these activities, and whether the customer is ready to pay a price which is higher than the total cost. That is one aspect. Now, there are various activities, business processes you may have to do to provide a service or to produce a product and sell it to a customer. Are you competent in all the activities which you need to do? So somebody may be good in some latest technologies there. So somebody may be good in operations, but if he starts doing the logistics part, maybe he's able to do, but then it may not be that effective. It may not be that efficient, because the requirement may be fluctuating. Now you can't, how do you decide on how many number of trucks you, and that's why the concept of third party logistics and fourth party logistics provider developed. Because you are not the best, your basic operation, suppose you are producing a product, is to produce that product. The logistics is not your main business. So that was another idea. So if you are the best one to do a particular activity, you do that. And if it is strategic to your business, you do that. Otherwise, can we outsource partly or fully? So what is the cost we are incurring, which we know as activity based costing? So what is the cost we are incurring on various activities which we need to do to provide a service or a product? Now, is that the best method? Can we outsource somebody, or is there somebody else who can do that better and at less cost and provide to us? So that again was the purpose of creating a value chain. So whatever product or service you get into, do develop a value chain, so that you know what are the activities, which are those activities which are strategic to you, which we need to do definitely in-house, and which are those activities which you can outsource. Now, how do you create value for which customer is ready to pay? Ultimately, whatever product you produce and sell to a customer, or a service you provide, the customer must see now that value, maybe by providing quality, maybe providing better service, so better quality, greater the value you create in the mind of customers. Lower cost, so same product you provide at a lower price, naturally customer will see higher value for money. The cycle time, how much time you take and naturally the value will be more. I already gave some examples. Now these are some of the ways you could create value, and any business, product or service you get into will satisfy one of these needs. Manufacturing, we convert physically inputs into a sellable product. If you are getting into some services, musical services or cinema services or concerts and all, is the essential services need we are serving. So whether we are able to create value through these services in the mind of the person, so that he comes to a cinema hall and pays even 500 for a show of 2 hours. Of course, doctors, psychiatrists and counselors, psychologicals. So these are some of the transformational processes through which we create value depending upon the type of service or product you are providing. Healthcare, physiological, retailing. After all, retailing, why should we pay? So a retailer buys a product say in 80 rupees and sells in 100 rupees. This 20 rupees is we are paying to him for the convenience he's providing to us in getting our need fulfilled through buying a product, and he's delivering to us if we are buying online. Telecom. So these are some of the transformation in the minds of a customer. How otherwise, even in a product company, there are various examples. The profits are these days earned more through the services rather than selling a product. A car manufacturer, the money he earns in selling a car is much less than what he earns in providing the after sales services, the repair and maintenance, providing the spares and all. So you can, in fact, they can become independent businesses, and they have become many independent businesses, because the after sales service, the money you earn may be much more than what you earn in selling a product. So the other ways where you could think of some ideas in developing your own businesses, naturally you'll have to solve some problem. That's the basic theme of any design thinking. Are you solving some problem? Are you making customer more convenient in in fulfilling his or her need? Is there some information you are providing which may be costly? In fact, all this, if you see the data is the cash today. So that's what. So what is data? That information, useful information you are providing to different people, that by itself may be a good business. The support I already mentioned you are providing. And again, just to because I have maybe another 10 minutes or so, so I'll be a little faster. What type of service you are providing? Again, you have to be very careful while you are designing your operation system, while you are designing your service system. Broadly, we can classify into 4 categories. Are we doing some tangible business on people's bodies? So all these healthcare services, transportation, passenger transportation, the beauty salons, the restaurants, hair cutting, we are doing something on the people's bodies. Restaurants, of course, we are providing that environment and serving them food and all. And some services through intangible action we are providing where people's mind, like education, broadcasting, information services, theaters, museums. So the type of value are, depending on the type of service, if you want to get into some service business, you'll have to be careful whether it is on people or on goods, freight transportation, repair maintenance, janitorial services, horticulture, veterinary care, or services like banking, legal, accounting, securities, insurance. Now, the type of systems you create will be very different, and the challenges will be very different if you have to provide the services on people or on the goods. Because services, these are 4 typical characteristics of services. The tangibility is less, and many services there is no tangibility, means though you can't see any physical aspect of services, any physical good. This inseparability means you are providing the service on the person or the goods, so the physical presence of the person or the goods is necessary. You have to transport some goods from place A to place B. Goods have to be there. You have to a person has to travel from place A to place B. The person has to be there physically. You have to provide some boutique services, so person has to be there. So variability, heterogeneity means the liking, the personal liking may be different for different people for the same service, and of course perishability. So you own a restaurant, you have provided some 10 tables for some 40 people. At some point of time only 20 people come, those 20 tables are vacant. Now you can't use them when 60 people come, so that is what we call as perishability. And as I mentioned, all product services, there'll be a bundle of products and services. So there'll be a different proportion of mix of products and services. So while you have designed your system, operation system or supply chain system, where do you lie in this continuum? So whether it's a, uh, uh, there can't be any product where some service part is not involved. There definitely may be some services where they are pure, where not much of physical or tangible items are involved. So it depends. So where do you lie in this tangibility spectrum? Again, briefly, because some of you I think may enter into some services where a lot of manual efforts would be maybe needed, and that's why different people have different productivity. While there are some environmental factors which have great impact, there are some organizational factors which have great impact, but some of the individual level factors which I want you to be a little concerned about. There may be individual vision. So if somebody wants to make a career in line A, he has to take up job in line B. Naturally, he'll make efforts to go into line A. His own motivation level, the skill level, and his own value system. And that's why we need to treat different people differently if we really want to increase the productivity of people. Now, any supply chain, maybe another 5 minutes I'll spend on that aspect. I'll start with an example. A typical product like day-to-day product, an FMCG product, for example, soap and detergent. Now, if you want to buy these type of products, they need to be manufactured in advance. And suppose you are going to a store and buying from there, you are going to a shop, and the product should be available. So the product needs to be manufactured in anticipation of the demand. This is what we call as push type of situation. That means you have produced something and now then you are pushing to sell it. While in many situations, the production is done after the customer demands the product. That means you are producing after the customer has demanded. So maybe some customized product, even dresses if you see, customized dresses. So customer goes and gives his measurements and then the garment is produced. So this is a sort of pull type of situation. So the way you design your way of providing a product and service will depend on what type of product you are in. Are you into a product which needs to be manufactured in anticipation of demand, or you are into a product? So if you open your boutique, maybe that some of the designs you keep ready in advance so that maybe people buy them, but many of those customized garments you'll have to produce after the customer has come and he has suggested his design, or out of the various options you are given to him or her, he or she chooses that. So while you are designing your supply system, while you are designing your delivery system, it is important to know what are those things which you need to do before the order is received, and what are those things you need to do after the order is received. Now, even in a boutique where you are producing, for example, garments to customers' requirement, you'll need to anticipate demand of various inputs like clothes. So different types of, if you are making cotton garments, you need to have some cotton clothes. If you are making some synthetic using synthetic cloth, you'll need to keep synthetic cloth in advance. So that's what through this push-pull system we say that there are some activities which we need to do in anticipation of demand, which we call as push processes, and some activities which we'll need to do, and that's how we reduce. So what is the advantage if we do some activities after the orders have been received? First of all, our inventory of the finished good is reduced, and of course the customer also gets satisfied because he's getting the product of his choice. I'm making the discussion a little brief because of the paucity of time. Now, just this concept in a supply chain, we need to understand, which we call as the bull-whip effect. See, mostly you'll get into such situation where there isn't much demand fluctuation as far as the customers are concerned. The level of demand may not change much. So this is a curve which is showing the level of demand over a period of time, which is not fluctuating much. Now, based on this, but retailer, if retailer has to order, he'll try to accumulate some of the demand. Suppose he places a weekly order and this demand is daily. So naturally, the fluctuation for the orders he places on manufacturer or distributor will be much higher. If you see later on the distributor, the fluctuation again, he'll be further compiling the demand. And again, if you finally go to the production level, it will be much more. So if you just compare the customer demand and the production, you see the fluctuation. So there is a lot of the fluctuation increases as we move away from customer to retailer, retailer to distributor, distributor to the manufacturing. So how do we solve this? So this we call as bull-whip effect. So as you move away from customer is the point where you hold the whip, and if you vibrate that whip, the level of amplitude will increase as you move away from the holding point. Now, how do you reduce this gap? That's the main job of a supply chain manager. One is, can you move closer to customer demand? One way I already told that can you convert more of pull activities rather than push activities, and that's why you'll be closer to the customer. And of course, uh, can we have information system where the customer demand and different stages in the production and supply chain are shared by all players in the supply chain? That's another way, sharing of information. So what product we get into and whether we should get into a product or not, we have to be careful to know what stage of the product it is. This we call as product life cycle. Many of you know that. And so there's an introduction stage, growth stage, maturity stage, decline stage. Now, if you want to enter into a product which is, say, later stage of maturity or decline, you'll be making a wrong decision. So whether it is introduction, you are coming out with a new product or a new concept in service, fine. Or growth stage, fine. Early stage of maturity, fine. But if the product has already moved into a late stage of maturity or decline, you should not get into. And those products I told where the FMCG type of products, the supply chain criteria, that's where I will land. The supply chain criteria will be entirely different. because FMCG type of product, which we call as functional products, which have long product life cycle, even though the product margin will be low, but then forecasting will be a little more accurate. The stock out rate, because you are producing in advance and error is less, will be less, and the chances of selling on discount will be less. As a policy promotion, you do discount, that's a different thing. So it's a more stable environment, but the competition is high. Innovative product, you'll find that the forecast errors, because they are temporary nature, the designs may change and the demand may be changing. So the errors will be more, and that's why you have to be a little more careful and closer to the customer. That's where probably I'll end my presentation. And I don't know whether there is any scope of questions.
So the question is on somebody want to understand break-even analysis once again. Quickly,
Yeah.
just touch for a 2 minutes on.
So break-even, the very name break-even analysis is that where we are breaking the even, we are getting into a profit level. So you get into say assembly of product, there is some fixed cost. So fixed cost is say 100 rupees. Every product you sell has a margin of 5 rupees. So you will meet the fixed cost if you are able to sell 20 products. So 20 becomes the break-even point. That is, break-even point is the operational level or the sales level, or where you are able to meet your fixed cost. So once you are met in such a simple example I gave, 5 rupees you are earning every piece, your fixed cost is 100, you sell 20 pieces, you meet that 100 rupee fixed cost. Now beyond that, you'll be able to earn some profits. So break-even point in this case becomes 20. So break-even point is the point at which you are able to mix your fixed costs, and if you are able to sell more products than that, then you'll be able to make profits. Margin is the difference between the price at which you sell and the variable cost. So naturally, the break-even point you must reach in your business, otherwise you are incurring losses. Now in those businesses, if the fixed cost is very high, the break-even point will be high. So that's where your business acumen comes. How do you reduce the break-even point? How do you bring that lower so that you start making profit even at lower levels? I hope, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean,
okay.
There is so much to understand about operations and supply chain. This was just a tip of the iceberg, but there was so much. But I'm sure audience got benefited out of it, and they got neck of a lot of important concepts and points that you shared with us. Anyone has any question before we close this particular session? I think they'll take some time to grab it and
yes. But I think you'll be sharing the presentation with
yes,
them. Yeah.
I'll be doing that.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir, for sparing all your time and joining us for this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
We'll be starting with the next My Story session in another 2 minutes.